Welcome to this lecture on the basics of neuroscience. Today, we are going to explore one of the most fascinating and complex communication networks in the known universe, the human nervous system. Whether you are taking a step, feeling the warmth of the sun, or simply breathing, this system is working tirelessly behind the scenes. We will learn how to classify its different parts and understand why this organization is so critical for our survival. To begin our journey, let us imagine you are the chief executive officer of a massive global delivery company. In this role, you sit in a central headquarters, making all the big decisions, but you rely entirely on millions of delivery drivers and telephone lines to send your orders out and get updates from the field. The human body works in the exact same way, using a brilliant communication network called the nervous system. By breaking this massive network down into smaller, manageable parts, we can see exactly who is giving the orders and who is carrying them out. Now that we have our analogy in mind, let us look at the first major division of this network. The nervous system is formally classified into two main divisions, starting with the central nervous system, or CNS. Think of the CNS as the ultimate command center of your body. It consists entirely of the brain and the spinal cord. Every single piece of sensory information you experience is sent here, where it is processed and integrated. It is the central headquarters where all the critical decisions about how to react to the world are made. While the central headquarters is vital, it cannot act alone, which brings us to the second major division. The peripheral nervous system, or PNS, consists of all the nerves that branch out from the brain and spinal cord, connecting the CNS to the rest of the body. The PNS is further divided based on function. First, we have the somatic nervous system, which controls your voluntary movements, like choosing to walk across a room. Second, we have the autonomic nervous system, which operates behind the scenes to control involuntary functions, such as keeping your heart beating without you having to think about it. Diving deeper into those involuntary functions we just mentioned, let us explore how the autonomic nervous system is further divided. It splits into two highly specialized branches that balance each other out. The sympathetic division is your body's emergency response system. It triggers your fight or flight response when you face danger. On the other hand, the parasympathetic division is responsible for calming you down, handling all the rest and digest activities when you are safe. Together, these two divisions ensure your body responds appropriately to both stress and relaxation. Understanding this detailed classification is not just an academic exercise. It leads us directly to life-saving medical applications. When a doctor examines a patient with a paralyzed leg, they must determine if the damage is in the central headquarters or the delivery cables. Different diseases attack very specific parts of this map. For example, Alzheimer's disease destroys the central nervous system, while peripheral neuropathy damages the peripheral nervous system. Furthermore, many drugs are highly targeted, such as asthma medications that specifically activate the sympathetic nervous system to open up airways. Without this map, diagnosing and treating neurological disorders would be impossible. To consolidate everything we have discussed so far, let us look at this comprehensive flowchart. At the very top, we have the entire nervous system, which immediately branches into the central and peripheral systems. Notice how the central nervous system on the left simply contains the brain and spinal cord. On the right, the peripheral nervous system branches further down into the somatic and autonomic systems. Finally, at the bottom right, you can see the autonomic system splitting into the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. This diagram perfectly captures the beautiful, organized hierarchy that keeps us alive and interacting with the world. Now that we have a clear map of the nervous system, let us transition from biology to mathematics. Even though this classification is a biological concept, we can mathematically model how these divisions work together to produce a behavior. When you touch a hot stove, a sensory signal travels through the peripheral nerves, gets processed by the central nervous system, and travels back through the peripheral motor nerves to move your hand. We can represent the total reaction time of this entire loop using a simple addition formula, which helps us quantify the efficiency of our biological wiring. This brings us to the mathematical representation of our reflex loop. The formula is T subscript T equals T subscript A plus T subscript I plus T subscript E. Let us break down what each symbol means. The variable T subscript T represents the total reaction time, from stimulus to physical response, measured in milliseconds. The variable T subscript A is the afferent time, which is how long the sensory nerves in the peripheral system take to carry the signal to the spinal cord. Next, T subscript I is the integration time, representing the processing time taken by the central nervous system. Finally, T subscript E is the efferent time, the time taken by motor nerves to carry the command back to the muscle. If any of these individual times increase due to nerve damage, the overall reaction time will also increase. Before we move on to complex diagnoses, let us see this formula in action with a concrete example. Imagine a healthy student participating in a reflex test where their knee is tapped with a small hammer. We are given that the sensory signal takes 15 milliseconds to travel through the afferent nerves. The central nervous system takes 5 milliseconds to process this, and the motor signal takes 18 milliseconds to travel back. We need to calculate the total reaction time. By substituting these given values into our equation, we simply add 15, 5, and 18 together. This gives us a final answer of 38 milliseconds. This perfectly normal reflex time demonstrates how seamlessly the central and peripheral divisions work together. Now that we have used this formula for a healthy patient, let us apply it to diagnose a medical issue. Consider a patient suffering from a mild form of multiple sclerosis. Their total reaction time is measured at 65 milliseconds. The doctors know the peripheral nervous system is healthy, so the afferent time is still 15 milliseconds, and the efferent time is 18 milliseconds. We need to find the central integration time. We plug 65 into the left side of our equation and 15 and 18 into the right side. First, we simplify the right side by adding 15 and 18 to get 33. To isolate our unknown variable, we subtract 33 from 65. This reveals a central integration time of 32 milliseconds. This mathematical strategy shows us exactly where the biological delay is happening. Following that calculation, let us take a moment to interpret what this mathematical result actually means for the patient. The final calculation revealed a central nervous system integration time of 32 milliseconds. When we compare this to the healthy 5 milliseconds from our first example, it shows a massive delay in the brain's processing speed. This mathematical result perfectly illustrates the physical impact of multiple sclerosis. Because we isolated the variables, it allows doctors to confidently diagnose that the issue lies strictly within the central nervous system, rather than the peripheral nerves. Mathematics has directly informed medical treatment. To wrap up our lecture, let us review the key takeaways from today's lesson. First, we learned that the nervous system is a beautifully organized hierarchy, broadly split into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central system acts as the ultimate command center, while the peripheral system serves as the communication cables, further dividing into voluntary and involuntary branches. Finally, we saw how mathematical modeling of reaction times allows us to pinpoint exactly where a breakdown in this communication occurs. By mastering this classification, you now have the foundational map required to understand all of neuroscience. Great job today.